Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Spotlight On. I want to thank you for joining in with us. We are talking to another Mississippi artist today who is a multi-talented artist, musician, and photographer. Very, very happy to have him with us. Welcome, Eddie Dixon. So,
Thank
Eddie, yeah. So, Eddie, thank you for joining in with us. I really appreciate it. Why don't you tell everybody who might not be familiar with you yet what you do? Because you do multiple things.
Yeah, it's and honestly, that it gets more absurd than that. I've actually published writing and poetry and things like this. It's a kind of dilettante disease where just I've constantly skipped from thing to thing my whole life. The thing that stuck the most is music. I've been doing music since I was 15, but when I was a kid, everybody in all my schools thought, oh, he's going to be a visual artist. Because, I was top of the class when I was in fourth grade. I was killing it back then. But I discovered music, and then I started using music as an excuse not to do my art stuff. And so just kind of let that stuff slide. And then it tends to happen when I get burnout making so I make music. I've done my main thing I've literally just been doing nonstop is photography. And not just that, I've figured out a sort of lane for myself that I really like that I just can't let go of. I haven't exhausted it yet. There's a lot of, I'm sure the feeling of like you get to the end of something, you're like, okay, that's done. Now I'm repeating myself or something like that. But when I get super frustrated, music is just a constant kick in the nuts, because especially if you're trying to do it professionally and you're putting your output in front of people to be judged. And when I started doing music, you could actually get, if you put in the time and you got a finished product of some sort, usually you could get some attention, because the bar was higher for people to get things out there. Like back then, to put out a CD, you were going to be paying a couple grand, not to mention studio costs, because not everybody had a studio in their apartment, Yeah. And then I've slowly watched it get that bar lower and lower and lower. And the cool part of it is amazing shit that you wouldn't have heard before is now just flooding into the place. Anybody that when people start sort of the fuddy-duddy stick in the mud talk about like, oh, music isn't what it used to be. Now it's just blah, blah, all this. They're out of their goddamn mind. It's amazing right now. There's like 16-year-olds doing stuff that is more complex than the most complex things that were happening in the 70s, and genre melding and doing all this stuff that like, so there's more stuff available to everybody. Like you're just getting a fire hose of content shoved in your face, But the truth is, it's kind of mostly good. You would think law and numbers would mean that a lot of it would be crap, but it's not. It's the fact that we weren't hearing this stuff before, hearing and seeing, this stuff before is a fault of what was happening before. Like in truth, there are this many, the idea that that talent was as rare and sort of miraculous as we thought it was before, when it was hard to get things heard, it's like, no, there's talent everywhere right now, but if you are trying to get yourself noticed, especially in like that fire hose of stuff, it tends to make people very novelty obsessed, and people get really excited about things on the edge of what's happening. Like if it shocks you a little bit or something like that. So for someone that doesn't I do weird things, but I'm also an old guy that does weird things. And it's not weird in a sort of fuck the police, knock things over weird. It's much more inward. So it doesn't have that shock value or the whatever, So it's really hard to get through the noise of everything that's happening and somehow get into people's heads is incredibly difficult. So it's always been that I'll finish something and then just get burnt after like a couple months of trying to promote something, and I just have to stop. I just have to leave. And usually that's when some kind of other pursuit pops up, you know. Before it was some poetry and things like that. I got some poetry published, and then most recently coming down here from Chicago, it was visual stuff in general, because I started off doing all sorts of visual stuff. I was interested in photography, but I was doing these digital paintings that I was intentionally making them a little crusty and naive, you know, like very childlike paintings, and then I would put them in thrift store frames. And they were also, I would spend most of my time adding textures to them to make them look broke and things. And I would put them in frames. And I was doing a lot of that my first year down here, and didn't even touch music, just wasn't anywhere near it. But I was also, a large part of it was I was kind of PTSD'd from getting out of Chicago.
Yeah.
None of the stuff people think about Chicago, not violence, not any of that stuff. Fuck that. You can live happily in Chicago. It's beautiful, you know, especially the right neighborhoods. You will live a beautiful, rich life there. My nerves can't handle the sheer everything of it. Like there's trains going overhead, there's noise at all times, and it's amazing. It's invigorating when you first get there, but I was there for 17 years. So when I moved down here, I was crispy critter as far as my nerves and everything else. And my initial plan had been to move to New Orleans, and I was just scared to do it. I didn't want to. I'd spent so much time alone and lonely and scared in Chicago that the idea of moving to another city and being alone and lonely and scared didn't appeal. So I started doing all this visual stuff. But the painting stuff started to drop off. And when I was messing with photography, I've always tried. Even when I was in Chicago, I was trying things with film cameras and things like this. Nothing would actually come together other than some pretty good dirty Polaroids. But other than that, nothing really worked, you know. I just couldn't work the machines. And then when I got down here, I wanted to get a camera so I could do long exposures. That was my main thing, is I wanted to figure out some way to get the stuff I love at night down, you know. And that's what started it. And that ended up being just the thing that stuck. I did like a bunch of those digital paintings, and I did one actual painting. Like I still sitting on a stack of paints that I haven't touched in a long time. But thing is, I was totally pleased with it. Like rather than the classic idea of being so, you know, the artist being so hard on this, burn it, I'm done. No, it's horrible. I was just like, I planned it. You know, I did like a digital version of it where I looked at it just to get the general shape together in my head. And then I managed to get it on there pretty well, and was just totally happy with it. But I haven't returned to that. The thing that stuck through all the other, there's a lot of ups and downs involving mental illness that happened. And the one thing that always sort of stuck by was I always just had my camera with me. I got a decent camera that was not a multi-$1,000 full frame, but something I could carry that had a lot of firepower, but I didn't have to worry about getting jacked out of my car or something like that.
Yeah.
And now it's like my Instagram, I've never gone back and whittled it down, but it's up there near 2,000, 3,000 photos on there. And it's just the thing that stuck the most visually. I just haven't returned to the you know, it maybe that stuff happens. I don't know.
What would you say that your like photographic aesthetic is? What do you try to go for when you start shooting?
it changed from what I started. I loved, like, initially my whole thing was I wanted to get nighttime down, like, and then I started realizing the realities and uh, of digital photography and noise. You know, there it ends up being a thing. I don't know how much you mess with photography, but to get really good um, night photos, it you have to have either really good equipment or a lot of time. And this, I did get what I wanted. I got a lot of, I approximated what I was seeing in my head initially, but what stuck out to me more than the time that I was photographing or the stuff was I started doing photos in a strange format. I would it's 9 by 16, but portrait oriented rather than landscape oriented. And the more I started doing that at night and during the day, like the feeling of because it usually includes a good amount of sky and then some foreground and then the thing you're interested in. And it's the one thing that made it feel most like standing in front of the interesting thing to me. Because like the normal 4 by 3 or whatever in photos, 5 by 7, things like this, always seem impossibly cramped to me. Even people that I love what they do, like the idea of cramming it into this little rectangle, always felt just goofy. Like that didn't feel at all like. It's one thing if you're dealing with a detail like bits of machinery or like a close up of something, or yeah, that makes sense. But for anything larger, it seemed like you're not getting any of the feeling that is involved in. Because even seeing a relatively broke down building in the middle of a field can be really awe inspiring when you take in the entirety of it. When you take in like stormy Mississippi sky, broke down building, you know, amazing foliage, all this other stuff. Yeah. So I do love decrepit stuff. I tend towards decay. And I actually, I had early on in doing the Instagram thing, I had a guy from Denmark get in touch with me, and he's like, you tend to do photos that are derelict. He's like, is everything in Mississippi derelict, or do you just like that? And I hadn't thought about it, but I was like, you know, it's kind of both. Because if you think about Mississippi, you either have, in general, there are exceptions in some towns where they've actually preserved their downtown or something like this. But in general, you have things that are falling apart or strip mall new because of how our zoning is and everything else. There's not a lot of, you know, amazing architecture going up. You know, it's rare because it's a poorer state, you know, so it tends to be either falling apart or brand new and sort of disposable. So that was my answer to him, was, well, it's kind of both. I like it, and Mississippi's decrepit.
I think our last big push for like new arts and new construction and everything was after the Civil War. So like it's like we're old state, we're old, and the new money hasn't flowed in. But there's I got to talk to another artist that's in another city, and they've come in and started revitalizing all of it. And he said it's amazing how the arts community have come in to really like step forward and put up or shut up, basically. So I'm hoping that becomes a trend.
It's so important for any like the whole idea of like cut taxes, bring as many businesses as you can in, everything's going to flourish. It's if you do it with just that, it's relatively soulless. You know, the places that really thrive, the places that really become destinations are culturally rich, as well as like, you know, there's business opportunities, yes, but you have to have some sort of additional food for the soul, or you're not going to get people there. And you're damn sure not going to get people there if you're still the sort of laughing stock as far as your attitudes, you know, and your place in history Like, are you actually in the modern era, or are you still sticking around Jim Crow? Like, what are you doing? If you don't like, if you can't get out of that position of being the butt of all the jokes, you're going to have trouble anyway. And part of that is having vital arts infrastructure. Like I think that's as important. All the places I like, downtown Detroit, actually. Remember they built a bunch of brand new buildings for business, right? They did all this building downtown and stuff, and then for years it just sat, and they didn't have anybody come in. But that they were only aiming at business, you know. But the people that did come in were artists that wanted like a flat that they could get, what do you call it, loft for almost nothing, you know. So arts go hand in hand with that, with making a city great and with make it actually thrive rather than just revolve around a single industry or something. Like, oh, the factory comes to town, then everybody works at the factory or whatever, you know. Back when factories existed.
It's missing the other half of it, right? The factory comes into town and everything's great because everybody's got a job, but what are they doing after the factory? You know,
Yeah.
What are they looking forward to? And that's something that we kind of missed. We've kind of stopped providing we're looking forward to this part of the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is there any, I mean, a lot of places in the state aren't even doing arts education, right?
Mm.
Or music. Like, a lot of the stuff's just getting cut out.
Yeah.
Like, so, and if you're not exposing people to that stuff, like, that's definitely when I got hooked on all sorts of stuff, you know. A recorder choir in the 3rd grade playing hot cross buns on a recorder was huge for me. Like, because like sitting in being in a 16-person group all playing hot cross buns on recorders with all the shrillness that's involved in that still just excited the hell out of me. And if I hadn't run into that, I'd like to think I still would have found my way here, but it damn sure wouldn't have been as easy, you know. And everywhere we visited, and we were a military family, so we moved around a lot. And everywhere we visited, because of how my mother was very much into art and music. She actually used to manage a band in New Orleans and all this other stuff. So when we went somewhere new, we were going to find the music, and we were going to find whatever art there was, you know. And you know, we were overseas. We were in Germany, living there, and everywhere we went to, we'd go to, you know, we would find whatever kind of music, and a lot of times it would be the stuff that was on a platter for tourists. But I just loved it. I loved, you know, German, like, polka music, and like you know, went to Poland. I love, of course, that's polka as well. But I love Eastern European brass band stuff, you know, like Serbian brass band stuff. And it's just, I don't know. I think you have to start putting those things in front of kids, or they're not, they may not have the free bandwidth to find it later. If you're not presented with any of this stuff as an option, if you're not presented with, like, oh, you can be an artist, or you can be a poet, or this or that, you might very well just like, okay, well, why don't I impregnate my girlfriend, and just go sit in a trailer? Like, why don't I do that? Because I love her. And as far as I can see, there's no other options. Why not stay in town? You know? So I think both showing people the skills, like, not just, you know, like, oh, we're making mugs or something, but also showing that art is a viable and needed thing that the world is going to always need. And you can be that. You're going to be broke, but you can be that, you know?
So did we talk about where you're at? Where are you at in Mississippi?
Ocean Springs, coastal.
Ocean Springs?
Yeah.
So what's the music scene like there for you? The music is not something that I ever get to talk about on here because I mostly have visual and sculptural artists. So I'd love to talk about that.
There's a lot of it going on. I have a relatively tightly circumscribed view of it because I have difficulties with my hometown. This is one of the places I lived with all through high school, and I moved here from somewhere I really liked in Texas, San Antonio. We moved here to take care of my grandmother, and I straight hated it for a very, very long time. And they actually tried to use the beach as a selling point for me. And then I remember coming down 49 and turning where you could first see the beach, and I was plastered against the window, wanting to see this amazing, like, oh, maybe I can surf. Maybe I can be a skimboarder or something like this. And it was just flat coffee black water with a few people walking around out there. And I was immediately depressed. And just and Ocean Springs has a lot of money involved in it and a lot of weird status play and stuff like that. So for me to pop into, ninth grade at that point, without like lifelong friends that you have if you've lived in a place, and right at the point when everyone's starting to get really cutthroat about social groups ins and outs and things like this. So I luckily I found some freaks, but in general I kind of despise the overall atmosphere of my town. There's a lot of money, and there's a glaze of artistic things happening. People, Walter Anderson, things like this. It's there, but like they still fought against this tattoo parlor getting on the main strip. So here we are, the artsy little rich community, and then they fought tooth and nail to keep this tattoo parlor out. Like it's a weird dichotomy. I don't know that it's the most open community in the world to artistic things. And musically I spent a lot more time. One of my major lifelines when I came down here is I used to go to Gulfport, and there was a bar called the Irish Coast Pub. And I went in there, and I was hating. This was moving down from Chicago, and even though I was twitchy from Chicago, I still hated leaving it. Plus, I'd left someone I loved there as well. That was something that broke. So there was all sorts of sadnesses involved. So I wasn't super jazzed to be here. And then I started going to this Monday night thing where they would a pretty good group of musicians, like these some of them real ringers, like tremendous musicians, but they would go up and they'd play songs and let anybody in the crowd come up and play anything. So, and my initial feeling from being like a professional musician who's been playing since I was 15 was like, oh, like, how can these people stand this? Because there's all this, some really clangorous and, oh, here. Is there a way for me to swing your camera around so I can show you something? Let me see.
Yeah.
Yes. You see him? My little crane friend?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those things are
a beautiful view.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. That's my happy place. But we also live right near where they have the Sandhill Cranes, and those they kind of walk along together, like that's their mode of operating. I've rarely seen them flying. They're usually walking along in a couple, and they mate for life. So they're almost always coupled up. And they just slowly walk across the field and work it. And they eat whatever the hell they eat. I think it's frogs, bugs, anything, But thing is, they can be incredibly still when they want to. And I remember getting stuck in traffic and kind of crawling along, and then just being stuck, waiting for a train, right? And I looked sideways and just looked right past this Sandhill Crane because he was standing so still that I just didn't register. It's like a T-Rex or something. I just didn't see him because he wasn't moving. And then all of a sudden he got spooked and opened his wings and flew off. And it was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, because they have like this 8 to 10, 6 to 8 foot wingspan or whatever, I'm pretty sure. And the sound of him just like beating the air to get out of there so quick, and just absolutely took my breath away. And that's happened a couple times. There's a place right over here where, again, snooty kind of rich houses and things. They even put up a sign on the thing saying, this is all private property. Keep the hell out. And but I've been going there for so long, like, yeah, throw me out, whatever. It's a road. But I pulled up next to I'm just cruising with my camera. I'm not fixated on wildlife, but when I run across it, I will absolutely. I love, getting it down. It's not necessarily what I aim at. But so I was driving along with my camera in my hand. I was watching the trees, and I saw, like, I was looking the other direction. When I looked this way, I saw one of the white cranes that was on the branch of a tree, and it was a foggy day, like this crazy kind of fog. And again, he like made the big retreat, and the way that he took off from the branch and disappeared into the fog left like the little Top Gun swirls behind him. And it was a really awe-inspiring thing and same sound too, that crazy sound when they're trying to get somewhere fast. There's a lot of wind moving past it, But we ended up, most of the people I met down here doing music were at that one place, and they definitely got me out of my snooty, up my own ass mindset. And I started really loving going there and having this communal thing that wasn't all about proficiency or anything like this. Actually, I'm gonna name call, because this guy named Zach Fellman, and he's a piano player, and I started out as a piano player, and he's tremendous. And almost single-handedly watching him play piano while someone really awful was trying to play the drums or this and that, watching him smile and carry on, knowing how good he is, and watching him deal with this in such an open way, that almost single-handedly like whittled me down to being more humble about the whole thing. And it ended up being pretty tremendous. I met some of the people from Roscoe Bandana, which was a band that actually, when I first moved down, was one of the only group of people I heard that was doing things like, I might have to move. No, okay, they're just putting trash cans in. But so I met most of my connections right there, and that's the people that have still sustained me, up to this point. I don't know that I've plugged into the music down here as much as I could. I've done a lot of work for people that I have in other places. I produced an album for my ex out in LA, like about a year after being down here. She flew me out. We recorded an album. We recorded the basic stuff in a week in a room in her little rent controlled apartment in LA. And then I came back and built the album around her, and then went back and we did all the artwork, which was amazing, like taking photos out at Salt and Sea in LA, which, speaking of decay, it's, have you ever heard of the Salt and Sea? What that was?
No, tell them about it.
It was basically a puddle. There was a break in a dam that flooded this valley that has no outlets. So it was basically the size of a lake had just accumulated at the bottom of this valley. And they had the bright idea that, well, we got this lake here now. Let's make it a lake. Let's, we'll put hotels, all this other stuff. So they put all this wonderful, like, 1950s, like, infrastructure around it, these amazing old buildings and stuff. And it was going to be, you could go boating, you could go all this other stuff. But what they didn't take into account was it's a closed system. It's this puddle of water that's not going anywhere. It's not having any much new water in because there's not a lot of rain. So what would happen is during dry spells, it would get lower and lower, and the oxygen content in the water would go down, and there would be these gigantic fish kills. So just bazillions of fish piled up and the entire valley would smell like fish. So it turned from being this like destination and sort of and eventually they just had to give up because it was too often when things would get going, there would just be this huge fish kill and the whole place would desert, So it was just like perfect human hubris, like, oh, we'll just make a lake and then it'll work out fine. No, it turns out lakes need like inputs, outputs, all this other stuff. And but what's great is you can go out there and there's not a lot of it left. There used to be, you could go out there and see all the old like motels and things like this that were in this amazing style from that time. A lot of that stuff's gone now. Like there's not as much of it, but we drove around. We found some really amazing just leftovers from that kind of stuff, and that's where we did all the artwork for the album. And it on the beach of Salton Sea, when you're walking, you notice it feels a little bit different than any other beach. And if you look closely, the entire beach is made up of billions of tiny fish bones that are just sun bleached. They're completely desiccated, and there's nothing affixed to them anymore, but just like the tiniest fish bones everywhere. And you're walking on an entire blanket of fish bones. It's a crazy place, and I loved being out there. But
so, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I did her album. I'm working with my friend in Pittsburgh, Adam Fitz, he's been my best friend for 20 years. And he moved to a new town about the same time I moved to a new town, or shortly thereafter. And he's got a lot of stuff that sort of distracts him. He's got a family and all this other stuff. And he's not as good with the technical side of recording and things as I am. So he's constantly been leaning on me. And I just love it. He's a tremendous singer-songwriter. And so most of what I've stayed alive doing is actually remote. I've done very little here with the people that are here, and I play soul music. I play bass in a soul band who's tremendous, and then I play in a church band, and I'm not a churchgoer, but I started doing it when I was in a really depressed place, and I forced myself to stay there, even though the stuff would drive. The lyrics of Christian songs, these modern Christian songs, can get really creepy. It gets into some really fascistic, like sort of marching songs, like the whole world will bow before us, this kind of thing. Creepy. But being around these people who are just kind people, I don't agree with them. I'm not going to agree with them, but I just made myself stay there because I was starting to realize how much I required people as a person. I always thought I was a grumpy loner guy. Turns out I was just shitty depressed, and that if you force yourself to retain some of these human connections, it absolutely will help you. So.
Well, for anybody that's wanting to find your work, listen to your music, or just find out any more about you, where can they do that?
EddieDixonMusic.com has most of my output, both my own and my production, and it's Dixon with Dixon. And then my photography is at GE Dixon Photography on Instagram. I also did a good bit of on my last album that I put out. I actually tried a lot of different I basically did a bunch of shoestring videos for it using just an iPhone.
I liked them a lot.
Oh, you watched some? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's especially one of them I actually even drafted in my friends. There's one of them where I used a program that turns the video into these line drawings. And I got my friend Jason from Roscoe Bandana to do like the boyfriend in the video. So he's like, oh, he's upset, and it's all of this stuff, and it's all in like silhouette. And then I got a really gorgeous friend of mine from Chicago who played the love interest in the thing. And again, it was all done in sort of line art. And she was nice enough to step out of a party 3 sheets to the wind and act like she was talking and take video of herself acting like she was talking. So she just went to another room and sat there and I'd asked her, I was like, I need you to look like you're laughing. I need you to look like you're whatever. And she just went, and probably if anybody had walked in, she would have looked nuts because she was just in there going, talking and not making any noises. So, but that was entirely like trying to figure out how to, with just iPhones, and well, I had an iPad as well, but just with free stuff available, and drafting in things that wouldn't normally be used for that purpose. Once I realized you could basically record your screen no matter what you had on there. So even if it was an app that didn't allow exporting video, as long as you could record that screen, you could do anything with it. So there was one of the videos has this sort of really psychedelic sort of rolling gears that sort of roll past the screen. And there's a little astronaut floating around. That was a second layer that I added to it. But the rolling gears was just a 3D model of an engine that I found an app for that you could turn it around and look at different parts of it and highlight different parts. So I just took a bunch of video of that moving around like that, and then simply just put it through something that made a mirror image on the other side. So what had initially been pretty obviously an engine became this rolling sort of psychedelic bunch of gears. So it's just about repurposing, using things wrong as much as possible. And so that was fun. I haven't done a lot of that recently, and I kind of miss it. But I got probably, I think there's 8 on there or something like that. So that was
there's a good amount. Well, there's the video section, and then there's also a music section too.
Yep. But something I want to inject into this conversation, because I try to as much as possible. I lifelong depressive, right? Wasn't always medicated for it. Didn't always know what it was. But for my whole damn life, And this last year, early 2019, I decided I was going to see what I was like without drugs. And I actually went and tapered off. I was under care. I had a psychiatrist. And I told him what I was planning on doing. I was trying to find some way other than constant input of drugs to keep myself afloat. And so I actually tried all these different things. I tried, I used to be as in my 20s, psychedelics did a lot for me as far as like keeping me afloat. And you don't have to do it all the time. It can happen and you have like a month-long glow of some buoyancy, and then you might have to prime the pump again, So I thought maybe that would be something. So I went off meds and really had one of the worst bottoming out I've ever had this last year. So I broke down to where there was just no hope at the bottom of it, But I knew this was because I'd gotten off meds, and so I had like a meta awareness of the fact that this isn't you thinking this is chemicals making you think this or whatever. But the reason this is
applicable, and I think it's important, is at the bottom of all that, I totally lost all art. Every bit of it. Like I lost every scintilla of enjoying art or enjoying my music or enjoying anything involved in that. And it's called Anhedonia is the name of it. It's when because your brain is just not producing what it's supposed to, nothing resonates anymore, you know? And that was a really helpful place to be. Like I eventually found a less intrusive drug to get on, and then also got healthier, which is huge. And I made myself, like, as with the church bands, things like that, I just forced myself to be in social situations and be around people. And I realized, oh, I like that. I'm actually a personable person that I've always just told myself I was a certain thing, you know? But coming from a place of, I watched my love for art filter back in. So I was able to watch it go completely away. And honestly, it was the worst feeling of my life, because I thought, well, what the hell are you? If you spend all this time doing creative shit your whole life, and if that can just be wiped out with a chemical change, who the hell are you at that point, right? But through carefully building back up, you know, and I saw at first little flickers, and then some larger amounts of time, and then I felt the love of art come back. And the first instant when I thought, yeah, I'm going to take a picture of that, you know, I'd stop. I've got my camera sitting right here with me, but I wasn't even carrying it in the car anymore, because it was there was just nothing. I wasn't interested, you know. I was just going about my, like, automaton, you know. But the first time I actually brought my camera, stopped, got out of the car, and went and took some photos of some stuff, and realized that I'd sort of lost track of time and this and that. And then there was also a point where I sat down at the piano and just sang something for just honestly for just testing to see if anything even halfway felt like it did before. And there was just that tiny glimmer of, like, oh yeah, like, this is why this feels good. So, like, to be able to feel with no uncertainty what art does for you, and to feel that coming from, it's kind of like people that have there's a really famous case of a woman that had that was a neurologist, you know, or a scientist that deals with neurology, you know, and she had some pretty bad strokes that basically knocked her back down to being not sublingual, not able to speak, you know. And so she wrote a book about it, and it's this amazing thing, because you have this person that has that knowledge of what's supposed to be happening and what isn't. And then she's able to actually watch as she slowly built her capabilities back up. So that it's an amazing appreciation of what this stuff actually does for you when it disappears. You know, I don't recommend it. Like, don't go chasing Anhedonia. It was horrible, and I was really in danger during that time. But I'm thankful for what happened, because it is like, now all the things I liked, I'm now even more thankful for. And I used to sort of beat myself up, because there's a lot of things I dip into and dip out of, like poetry and writing. You know, I don't do that all the time. And at one point, I actually I was having a bad breakup with somebody, and she's like, "You don't even write your poetry anymore." And in my mind, I was like, "Oh, that was bullshit. I was writing poetry because I was lonely and I was in Chicago. If I'd had anything else to do, I would have been doing that." Like, in my mind, I thought I was just full of shit, you know, charlatan, you know. because yeah, maybe I have something going in music, but all this other stuff can't be real because I'm dipping in and dipping out. So, and that goes against the whole idea of the artist as this single-minded, crazy person, you know, hacking off ears and you know, destroying their relationships and all this other stuff. And what happened coming out of that? Oh, what during the breakup, she's like, you don't even write your poetry anymore. And I actually did say out loud, I was like, that was bullshit. That wasn't me. That was just something I was doing to keep the time. And now years later, it has always returned. It pops up and I'll go through periods of time where I'm just pumping it out, you know? And it's not like, I'm not studious about it. You know, it is very much being a dilettante. Like just what comes out. Then when I'm done, I'm done. And then, but I like it. I actually like what I do there too. So, all those things now, I don't judge myself in that way anymore. Like the whole like, oh, you can't possibly be a poet. You're doing this other shit. Like, what's your problem doing all this stuff? You can't possibly be a visual artist because you're a musician. Like, what the hell are you doing with this stuff? So all bets are off, and I kind of allow myself all the stuff now.
For anyone that's watching and might be relating, especially to the mental journey that you just took through, what was your kind of turning point when you realized, hey, this isn't normal? I'm not supposed to be just feeling and living like this way. Yeah. What was your turning point?
And it's not very instructive because I had a very easy breaking point that was pretty obviously chemical. So I didn't have the hemming and hawing that a lot of people have. Honestly, if I'd been around, you know, if I'd had insurance, if I'd been around therapists before, they would have told me at 15 or like 20, like, no, you're depressed. This is chemical depression, whatever. So maybe I could have caught it earlier. But when it finally came down to it for me, I hit like 32, 33, and I dropped off a cliff. And it was blazingly obvious. Like it was wake up and weep. I would literally wake up, think about what I had to do that day, and just lay in bed and cry and hardly be able to move. So like for me, it was easy. And I know that's not really helpful, but I try to. It's a little strange because most psychiatrists will tell you they don't even really know why these drugs work now. The available model of serotonin, like, oh, you're missing some, so you plug some in, or you don't allow your brain to reuptake this stuff, so you have more available. Like they know now that was a guess. And my shrink when I was trying to do this and feel my baseline and everything else, when I finally got around to trying a drug, you know, to get back on something, I realized I cannot be not medicated. You know, he actually asked me, he's like, well, what do you want to try? Because he full on knows that, and is not. I love him for it too. Is he doesn't try to pretend that he knows how this is going to work for anybody, because it's a really mysterious place. But the first drug I got on, which was Zoloft, it honestly saved my bacon, because I couldn't have existed like it was. I had trouble with it later when I got on higher doses, but honestly, it worked. So for people, I'm a booster a little bit, because it doesn't fix anything, but you're not even going to be able to think about doing the work you have to do in your life to get less depressed if you can't get out from under the chemical dump that just is constantly making you bedridden or this and that. So for people I know, I try to get everybody to at least try. You know, it's a little spooky because sometimes the stuff doesn't work. Sometimes the stuff does do weird stuff to you. And one thing I absolutely do not subscribe to is I had a really talented girlfriend in New Orleans. She was a painter, a poet, and like has a master's in poetry. Horribly talented person. Literally, and I gave her a little 6-megapixel camera I had once. It was an audio recorder that had a camera built into it for some weird reason. It's this weird Chinese thing. And I gave it to her just on shits and giggles because I knew she has so much of a built-in aesthetic about everything. And sure as shit, with this little 6-megapixel camera, she was sending me back these photos that were just gorgeous, you know? But she, when she would sort of fall off the deep end a little bit and she'd call me, I was in Chicago, her thing was, I don't want to lose my artistic spark. And I think that's a lot of people especially in our field, when like anything creative, they're like, but am I still going to be me? You know?
Yeah.
And while I can't guarantee you that you're going to have the same fervor for what you're doing or whatever, you're damn sure not going to be doing a lot of stuff if you're dead. You know, dead people don't paint. Dead people don't write. So try it. Like and I know from where I'm at now, I've had somebody recently describe me as happy-go-lucky. And that's a person that was depressed for like 30 years plus, you know? So, and I'm doing some of the best stuff I've ever done now, you know, both with photography and with music. I'm more on my game than I've ever been. So the idea that you have to just like wade in misery, you know, for fuck's sake, don't chase misery. You're going to have it. It's going to find you. That's the thing. You're going to have plenty. You know, if you're worried, if you're like 20 and you're worried, it's like, how can I be an artist? I haven't suffered yet. Oh, you're going to suffer. There's something waiting for you, and it's going to kick your ass. Don't chase it. Enjoy it, and just do the art, you know? Like, art does not require blood. It just doesn't, you know? There are some people that, because of the nature of what they do, I'm not going to remember his name. There's this amazing Polish painter that does these nightmarish, I'm not going to remember the name, useless to, but because of, I don't think that guy would have gotten there without some suffering, you know, but in general, you can find something that you're going to do creatively that does not require you opening up your veins and being around toxic people and making yourself unhappy all the time. So don't do that. Dead people do not paint.
Well, Eddie, I want to thank you so much for being with us and joining us and sharing this journey, not only with your music and your art, but your own mental journey. The talking about this stuff is so important because
yes.
you never know who's going to relate to it and who's at that turning point. Who is this going to reach where it might give them just enough courage to say, hey, I'm going through some stuff and it might be chemical. You know, it might just not be me. So I really appreciate you.
Watching your you know, listening to your interview with Lindsay too. She was really great about getting into that, you know?
Yes. And she's another one who's just been so forthcoming about her own journey and just knows that it can only reach other people.
Yeah.
Well, for anyone who's watching that wants to find more of Eddie's work, it's eddiedixonmusic.com. And then you can also find him on Instagram at GE Photography. I will link all of that below in the show notes on YouTube. And then we'll also be in the interview post at thelittleyellowbuilding.com. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in and supporting the arts. And we will be back next week.